So those two pieces, but it wasn't until I had transferred from one agency to another that I realized I had my aha moment. I was about 35 and I was like, "Oh, I can retire in 13 years if I have all of my ducks in a row." So even though having a pension and all that, I still needed to be ready for an immediate 40% cut in pay. Having that happen on that day, not being old enough to, get into the 401s, IRAs, anything like that. I needed to be ready for that. So that was my motivator. I realized it could happen as early as age 48. So that is what I planned for.
Welcome to today's episode of Money Matters. We have a truly inspiring guest joining us today, Dalene Higgins, the founder of Elevate Finances and the host of Wealthy After 40 podcast. Dalene is a dedicated financial coach who specializes in helping Gen Xers navigate their financial journeys, especially women over 40 facing financial challenges. Her mission is to empower her clients to create successful money routines and plan for a secure financial future. In this episode, we'll dive into Dalene's personal journey of retiring at 50, the unique strategies she shares with her clients, and her insights on overcoming financial hurdles such as debt and budgeting. We'll also explore her valuable advice on preparing for retirement both financially and emotionally. Make sure to stay tuned until the end of the episode where Dalene will reveal some practical tips and actionable steps that can help you achieve financial freedom and stability, no matter where you are on your financial journey. So let's get started. Dalene, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I'm excited to chat.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive right into it. So, can you share a little bit about your personal journey to financial independence and what motivated you to really uniquely? A lot of people haven't hit that milestone by the age of 50. What motivated you to retire at the age of 50?
So I was one of the fortunate that actually has a pension. And when I started my career in government, I was 18. So those two pieces, but it wasn't until I had transferred from one agency to another that I realized I had my aha moment. I was about 35 and I was like, "Oh, I can retire in 13 years if I have all of my ducks in a row." So even though having a pension and all that, I still needed to be ready for an immediate 40% cut in pay. Having that happen on that day, not being old enough to, get into the 401s, IRAs, anything like that. I needed to be ready for that. So that was my motivator. I realized it could happen as early as age 48. So that is what I planned for. And then I just kind of went off there as if I was ready, if I wanted to. All my working years, I was not going to be that individual that stayed in that position too long and became the anchor, the weight that people are like, "Oh, I wish this person would just leave." And so I didn't want to go at that. I feel like I was able to, for myself, go out on a high. I also have been reflecting. It's been 2 years this month that I actually retired. And I realized that I left mainly because I was no longer challenged in my position. And, there was no other way to move in the career in that choice is right immediately. And so I think that was my overarching. I said to my husband, "I'm ready to do it." He said, "Okay, when?" And that is a question that I don't think any of us realize. We always think about, oh, in 5 years or, oh, in year 2026 or something like that. But when it comes down to the actual month and day, there's a whole lot of feelings with that. Originally, I was going to go in October. And then I'm like, why am I waiting that long? I don't need to be that long. So I was going to go um in kind of recognition to my mother. I was going to go on her birthday, which was also her death day, and that's August 1st. So I'm like, "Oh, I'll do that. That will be great." And then I'm like, why am I waiting till the end of summer? How many years have we worked after you get out of school, you have no more summers, you're working. So I left June 1, and I had that was my first summer of 2022.
2022, June 1st. Wow. So a lot of stuff that you just shared with me. Thank you for sharing that, by the way,
Yeah.
is kind of hitting home for me here because I work with, that's my kind of my niche or my specialty as a financial advisor. Is I work with people who have a pension. They're state employees. They're 5 to 10 years away from employment. Are from retirement, really. So that, not everybody can say they have a pension, and it's one of these things that I've seen people retire earlier than they thought. And it can even be forgiving for people who come back to work at a later life and haven't done a lot of savings. Pension is really, it's a really unique thing. We don't see it as much, and a really, really good thing. So, sorry, I got on a soapbox there for a second.
You're fine. You're fine.
Some of the other things that you shared with me that I would say are really unique is just the age. 50 is really considered early retirement for most. Most people don't look to retire until much later. So I'm definitely going to ask you, and why don't I go ahead and do this instead? I'm going to ask you about some of the roadblocks that you might have not known about, but came online by retiring a little bit earlier than what people normally see as a traditional retirement date.
Well, I was fortunate. My dad, he had I want to say forced early retirement, but it wasn't necessarily forced. It was an opportunity for his pension to be greater than if he, would have worked. So he left
Mm-hmm.
immediate. So he retired at age 57. So I was grateful to have that role model and seeing what he kind of did. However, I don't think I was old enough. I wasn't. I was still in high school when he retired to actually ask him those pinpointed questions. So as I began my journey, which is going to segue into one of your other questions, I know, as I was like, okay, I'm ready to. My husband had retired. He retired 3 years before I did. And he's one that just always wanted to work. So he takes the passion of I'm working part time, wherever, making a wage, doing what I want. And so he just kind of flits around from almost part time to part time, seasonal to seasonal. He loves that. So as I'm coming up on it, I'm like, what am I going to do? 50 is still young. Not going to sit in the recliner all day and, Netflix and all of that. So I started thinking about what is it I want to do? What is it I like to do? How do I want retirement to actually be for me? How do I want it to feel? And I'll tell you immediately, I was like, I am not going to be on somebody else's timeline. That just struck with me because one of my ideas, I'm an avid fiction reader. I love to
Mm-hmm.
read. I love when people love to read. I love when kids learn to read. So I was thinking, okay, I'll just go help at the schools and, to be a reading tutor, support them, volunteer, all of that. And then I realized I would be on somebody's timeline. And I'm like, I don't want to do that, And so through that process, I discovered financial coaching. And it just really hit with me because I had reached my ultimate financial dream. And that feeling of the accomplishment of such a large goal, financial goal, it's kind of same as buying your first home, but not in the same sense because it's not a completion. Being able to move into a home and buy a home is one thing, but it's a completion when you pay it off. It's a completion when you retire. And so getting there. So I just really wanted to share that excitement with others in whatever it is their ultimate dream is.
I love that. I love that because it's a unique experience, what you've had of being able to retire earlier than kind of everybody else there. And this sounds like it inspired you to really found what became Elevate Finances. Tell us a little bit about what Elevate Finances is and how it's really evolved since the beginning.
Yes. So, like I said, I discovered financial coaching. Got some training. I say that lightly, but learned exactly what that was, how to support that. I had my own journey. I did my own thing. I believe. I'm just want to throw this in here. I believe budgets are very powerful. I am definitely one that is a proponent for that. I would not have been able to retire had I not had a budget to be able to get it so focused on my two. There were two goals: a short term and a long term. And so I started my business with really no experience as an entrepreneur. I was working for law enforcement, I was a support personnel, and we didn't do marketing. So that's been my biggest, hurdle challenge is the marketing. But I have loved it. And initially, I wasn't sure who I wanted to serve, kind of thinking around all of the things. And it finally, I would say about about a year ago, I was like, it's Gen Xers. I want to help those people of my generation in this area that they don't believe enough in themselves to be able to take that next step. Retiring is scary. I will admit that. But it is so freeing. And I think more people could do it if they just trusted in themselves.
I love it. I love it. Also, a Gen Xer just turned 50 in April. So, yes, the latchkey kids of our generation may be a little bit
Yes.
skeptical when it comes to, oh, can we do this? Is this something that we can, do? So, I love that. I love that. You shared with us quite a few bits of powerful information there. So, when you retired, a lot of times people will go back and they'll do a business that they had kind of in the back of their head, or something that is, it could be a hobby but also is a money making revenue stream in retirement, right? So
Hmm.
anything that you do, and when I say hobby, the only reason I'm saying that is because it's not something you did full time for a gig as a paycheck before, right?
Yeah.
You were, and you shared that with us, which is important because for people who take this second step of entrepreneurship in after they've retired, one of the things you shared with us was marketing, right? So even, we might, you might be the best financial coach in the world out there, but if the marketing thing doesn't work, that's a skill set that we all have to learn. So I know that
Yeah.
as a financial advisor, whether you're a plumber, whether you're anybody who goes out there and
Yeah.
puts a shingle up and starts a new business line, what you shared with us about that marketing piece, it being something that you have uh, to really learn and learn fast. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that for people who are on their second act. Who've
Yeah.
retired and then decided, hey, I want to open a business, right? So that's really important there. I want to talk about your podcast because you're not only are you doing the Elevate Finances, which is sounds like a full time, that could take all your time up. You also have the podcast here, Wealthy After 40. What are some of the most memorable episodes or impactful moments from your podcast?
Yeah, so they the memorable ones for myself were those coming on to share either they're doing work within the divorce, people who had experienced divorce, what they were doing, or those sharing their journey of divorce and how that related to money has been so memorable and helpful for me as I work with clients. A majority of my clients have been post divorce, probably 2 to 5 years, and I agree that there's a lot of healing that has to happen, and the money is kind of caught up in that for different reasons. And so, being able to learn from these guests that have come on the show, shared, specific personal experience, or shared that one was a divorce coach and how she helps, and how it is important to have your money in line, and just talking about all that. The most impactful episode I have had to date is the one that was focused on focus groups. So I had made a connection on Instagram. This young girl was a stay-at-home mom, but wanted to work, wanted to contribute. And so her experience in these focus groups, which is like a really amped up survey situation. And she's making money, she's sharing that. So I'm like, hey, will you come on? I'm sure there's people looking for a side gig or a side hustle. And she's like making, she's making about $1,500 a month on time in between raising a 3-year-old. And so
Wow.
that has been the most impactful. People joining or listening, or wanting more information on that. That has been a big one.
I love that. I love that. So those are two really important issues, and I know when it comes to wealth and finance, like literally, there's such a broad area that you could talk about a lot of different stuff. But the divorce one specifically, you've had people come on for the coaching where these issues have come up. So I know with me, I kind of learn as I go. So over the podcast that I have, you have these topics on here, and it kind of just makes it easier for you to discuss these topics. But divorce is one of those that is really, really heavy. And then it sounds like you're dealing with people post divorce too. So they've gotten past the divorce, but they're still trying to get control over their finances at that point. And then you also shared the one with the focus groups that you've had people asking for. So this makes me want to go back and listen to those episodes. For
Yeah.
people who want to, and we'll have this at the end on the podcast notes, but for people who want to find the podcast, what's the best place for them to go?
It's on every listening platform, but Apple, Spotify, iHeart is a big one. I know a lot of Gen Xers listen on iHeart. It's there as well. So, yep, Wealthy After 40, it'll pop right up and you have access to all of the episodes as of Tuesday's most recent one. So,
Awesome. Well, I encourage people to listen. I'll go check it out because I'm a Gen Xer too. So these are very In fact, when we talk about the generational view of Gen Xers, what are some of the most common financial challenges that you see Gen Xers facing today?
yeah, so I've kind of touched on it a little bit. I believe, and they may not see it as being a challenge, is the belief in themselves and the understanding that worth to really create that second phase of life. And I call retirement a second phase. Life is not over just because you're done working what you've done for many, many years. So I believe that is the overarching challenge, but really specifically, it's going to be they still have a mortgage. They're trying to figure out how to pay that down. They're maybe in a spot of caring for aging parents and how does that fit in? And if parents haven't planned financially for that, do they support them? Do they not? And on the reverse side of that, because we are a sandwich generation at this point with our kids, still supporting them to get them off to college, or maybe they're still at home for different reasons. The housing market is crazy right now. So, really trying to support our children as well. I was doing an interview, it's been about a month ago, and a lot of questions came through as more worried about their children than they are about themselves. And it's like, yes, the landscape has changed, but really the tactics have not. It's just keep going and keep driving. So, there's a lot of that, but I really think it just ties back to the belief in themselves. We've worked for years, right? Gen Xers, we started working as early as I've heard some people say 9 or 10. Myself was probably 11 getting that babysitting job. It's just what we've done. And that, I think there's the fear of where's the money going to come from, and the belief in that, there is enough, or, and that's definitely where they step into a role with you as a financial advisor. What does it look like? But I love my role as a financial coach for somebody headed into retirement. You've got to have a budget. What do you want your life to be? If you're going to travel every year, what is that going to cost? How does that fit in? And then that way it gives a really good number for somebody like yourself to really help these people. Okay, you can travel. Yep, you've got more than enough, and just supporting that. So,
I love it. I love it. So a lot of things you just shared with us right there, particular to Gen Xers. You started with the belief in themselves, the idea that there is something at the end when we do all of this hard work that we've been doing, and
yeah.
and really getting ahead of it. I know as somebody who's 50, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I am marketing and working with retirees, right? And so I was talking about the boomer generation. Somewhere along the lines, what we call the sandwich generation, we've now stepped into that role. So
Yes. Yeah.
100% agree with that. The idea that we're having to take care of our aging parents, that we've got our own kids. And you said sometimes we're worried more about our kids than ourselves at this point, that we're trying to either get up to school or take care of them prior to that. And our goals get sandwiched right in the middle there. And then really the idea that we worked from the beginning. You're right. I kind of think 12 is when I started doing like odd jobs and stuff, and then
Yes.
working right in high school. So that is something that our generation has there in common for sure. But how do we wind down as we get closer to this retirement here? And then I want to pivot, because this is something that you're a big advocate of, and you've already mentioned it quite a few times here: budgeting. You have kind of a unique approach to budgeting where you talk about different phases when it comes to budgeting. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the concept of 5 budgeting phases from shock to second nature?
Yeah, so I can show you how to budget, but as I was reflecting on my journey, I realized that there's actually these phases, and understanding each phase I think is more impactful for the individual on the journey. So the very first phase is just new, and it doesn't matter if you're just starting again or if you've never done it before. Everybody's in a new phase. And so you start with the numbers, you hope they're correct. And as you start using that, you move into the discovery phase. So, for example, I've been working with a client, and just this week she says, okay, I think that number is enough. Where I remember, 2 months ago, she says, okay, I don't know that that spending amount is enough. And I said, well, you've got to use it. It's a matter of using it and following it. There's clarity, there's awareness, and so you don't have that in the new phase, but you start getting that in the discovery phase. And then as you're getting, as things are happening, not, there's that situation, but there's always also, oh, I forgot about that bill. Oh, I forgot I have that charge that happens quarterly or biannually, or those are usually the ones that we don't remember and we don't budget for. And they definitely should be in your budget every single month, even if you're not expected to pay for it, 6 months for now, 12 months for now. And then from there, you go into actually building of a budget. So creating and building. So as those things are arriving, as those things are showing up and your clarity is really heightened, you build it and then you start refining it. Because now you have everything that's in there, what you've been doing, does it really tie into what you want? And so as you recognize that with, oh, my goal is this or my goal is that, how does this help this? And so you go into refinement phase. As you funnel through that refinement phase, you're going to get to a phase of stability. And so really this could be, on a quick side, you're probably looking at about 3-4 years. On a longer side, it's going to be 10 years. I mean, money is a long journey, whether you're talking day-to-day finances or saving for retirement. It's a long game journey, but you'll eventually reach stability where your budget does not need refining. It doesn't need, your clarity and awareness is already there. It's second nature. It becomes that second nature. So like when I said shock to second nature, people get frustrated. They get overwhelmed. They're like, why isn't this working? This is so wrong. And then all of a sudden it just is what it is.
I love it. I love it. So, a couple things I hear there. One, I hear a real system and a guidance rather than somebody just saying, "Hey, go do a budget." You've got this process in place to help people. What does that mean? How do I do that? And then
Yeah.
there's this realistic expectation: is this is not going to happen right away. This is something that can take years to refine. In fact, as you were describing it, the idea of these bills coming in, some being annually, some being quarterly, we still are doing this, right? This is an ongoing process. So
Yeah.
this is everybody. Doesn't matter what economic situation you're in. The idea that having a system in place for a budget is a really good thing. We only have about 5 minutes before the end of the show, and I definitely want to talk a little bit about debt management because that's one of the areas that you help people with as well. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about some of the experiences you've had with debt management, maybe working with clients, strategies for the listeners.
Yes. So my most recent client, that was her complaint when she came to work with me. She's like, I don't know why, but my debt just keeps climbing. So as we worked together, I explained to her how she needed to plan for what we talked about in that discovery phase of those expenses that are, one off. They're, 2 months out, they're 4 months out. And she's like, oh, yeah, I think that is where I've been turning to this instead of planning for it. And I just get caught in a rut and I have to use my credit card. And so with her, we were able to get her on track with all of those expenses and how to, with the system that I have, which is called the plan ahead method, and just start working through with that to plan for those unexpected expenses. They're not truly unexpected, they're just not regular expenses. So, getting that system into place. And it was within that third week, she's like, okay, I'm ready. How can I tackle my debt? And so with her, we set up, do you want to do the snowball or the avalanche? And I'm sure a lot of people have heard this. It really comes down to your desire. What do you need as a reward? If you're somebody that needs to be rewarded immediately, you're going to lean more towards the snowball. If you're somebody that's like, I just want to get it paid off the quick, or not the quickest, but the most cheapest way, then obviously that you're going to go with the avalanche. So those are those two differences. But then I also discuss with them, is there a debt that you truly have other emotions outside of? Maybe something happened, for example, you're paying off divorce fees, or you made a horrible purchase, investment, or something, and you're just still trying to pay that off. If there's anything that's got additional emotion, I really tried to lend them there, because once that's gone, the emotions, that reliving that moment, that experience will go away as well. So they can actually heal as an individual besides paying down their debt. So we just kind of structure it through that. And then I love to explore with them if there's any windfalls, extra money, talking to like overtime or a tax return, and we set a plan in place before this actually happens. What do you want it to be? Do you want to use all of it? Do you want to use some of it? Is there, how does this work in line with your goals that we've talked about? What are you wanting to do future wise? And so, really guiding them to not feel like they are giving up what they're currently doing or wanting to do or desire, but also being able to pay down debt in the amount of time that they're like, okay, that's not too bad. I can do that.
I love it. I love it. So, Dalene, I can hear your passion about what you're doing here. And I'm thinking, so you came from a law enforcement background, and this is kind of a second thing for you, but this is so cool because I can really hear this is something that you like doing. And the things that you just shared with us, you talked about some of the emotion behind the dollar signs as well. This is interesting. We just had Chris Wong on yesterday, who was a therapist, and we talked about couples counseling with finances and money. And so he touched on the idea of emotion as well. And so it's kind of neat to see those reoccurring themes there. It does happen. It runs, we run into it. The example that you gave with divorce, that's going to be one of them, right? Where there's
Yeah.
this emotional anchor there, right? We are right here at the end of the episode. We could sit here and talk about this stuff all day. That was
Yeah.
a fast 30 minutes there. Dalene, for listeners who would like to get to know you a little bit better, what is the best website for them to find you on?
Yeah, www.elevatefinances.us. Everything's on there about me, about what I do, about my programs, and yeah, how you can connect with me otherwise.
I love it. I love it. And what have I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with listeners today?
I want to just share that you really need to lean into budgeting. If what you have tried in the past doesn't work, there is another way. There's not just one way to budgeting. We can make it easy, we can make it simple, but the longer you put it off, the further away your goals will be.
What a great thought to leave the show with today, Dalene. Thank you so much for being on the show. Have a good rest of the day there.
Thank you.